All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're unpacking a pretty wild forecast for the rest of 2026. The date is March 6th, and the world's markets are, well, they're teetering right on the edge. We're going to look at how AI, oil, and geopolitics are smashing together to create what looks like a perfect storm for everyone. Just look at all that red. This is the story of March 6th. The Dow, the Nasdaq, the big European markets, they all took a serious hit. But, this isn't just another bad day on Wall Street. The analysis we're digging into calls this a structural break in the global economy. And it was all lit on fire by a new crisis erupting in the Middle East. And who better to capture this mood than Michael Burry, the big short guy? He saw the absolutely insane swings in South Korea's KOSP market and came out with this chilling line. One of the four horsemen of the apocalypse has arrived. What he's really saying is that we've crossed a line. We're in a new reality where the markets are being driven by raw fear, not by, fundamentals.
So this chaos really sets the stage for the big drama of 2026. Everyone's looking at AI, but here's the trillion-dollar question. Is AI the hero that's going to ride in and save the day, or is it just the biggest, most catastrophic bubble we've ever seen just waiting to pop? Okay, so here's the thing. The analysis says the whole AI industry is splitting in two. It's two completely different stories. On one side, you've got the hardware giants. Think NVIDIA. They're mature, they're profitable, they are literally printing cash. But on the other side, you've got the AI software companies, the cool new models. And they're the complete opposite. They're young, they're burning through money, and they're drowning in debt. They're facing what this report calls capital failure, which is really just a polite way of saying they're about to hit a wall and run out of money.
So what are the odds of that actually happening? Well, a pretty sophisticated model was run on this, and the result is, honestly, it's stunning. There's a 78% chance that these AI software companies are going to see a massive collapse in their value by the end of this year. Let that sink in for a second. 78%. That is a huge number. So, what's going to kick this all off? It's not just one thing. It's more like this perfect storm of three factors. First, the government steps in. Imagine the Pentagon blacklisting a big name like Anthropic. That sends a shockwave of fear through the whole industry. Second, that capital failure we just talked about, the money tap just gets turned off. And third, you have this wild card called reflexivity. It's a vicious feedback loop where the initial collapse creates so much panic that it drags the entire tech sector down with it. And here's where it gets really interesting. This whole AI situation, it's not happening in a vacuum. The truly scary part of his forecast is how this AI bubble is set to collide with two other massive global shocks. That's what creates the perfect storm for the rest of the year. All right, so here they are, the three massive forces that are shaping this entire forecast. You've got the geopolitical shock from a new war, what's being called an economic dead end for consumers, and of course the AI bubble bursting. Let's take a quick look at each one. First up, we've got this geopolitical shockwave. They call it an X event. Think of it as a worst-case scenario that nobody sees coming, but it changes everything. In this case, it's a full-on war in the Middle East that shuts down the Strait of Hormuz. That move alone takes a fifth of the world's oil offline. The main thing you need to remember is this. This single event makes high inflation a permanent structural problem. It's not going away. Second, the foundation of the economy itself is starting to crumble. The analysis points to this idea of an E-shaped economy. At the top, the rich are doing great. At the bottom, people are really struggling. And in the middle, a middle class that's getting squeezed and is basically living on debt. And you can see it in the numbers. The US lost 92,000 jobs in February, but at the same time, consumer credit went way up. Think about that. People are losing their jobs and they're swiping their credit cards more than ever just to stay afloat. The middle is getting hollowed out. And the third big driver, it's just market madness, pure and simple. George Soros called it reflexivity. It's basically a feedback loop where what people believe becomes the new reality. Those crazy swings in the Korean market driven by trading algorithms, that's a perfect example. The fear and the volatility created by the computers become the new reality, no matter what the companies are actually worth. Fear is literally creating its own crisis. So you take these three huge forces, a geopolitical bomb, a consumer on life support, and a market that's lost its mind. What happens when you mix them all together? Let's break down how this is all expected to play out region by region for the rest of 2026. For the US, it's a classic stagflation cocktail. The economy grinds to a halt, but inflation stays hot. That is absolute poison for company profits, which leads to a projected 15 to 20% drop in the S&P 500. And with inflation and defense spending both climbing, bond yields are expected to keep rising. The only potential bright spots? Oil could see a massive spike, maybe to $120 a barrel, and you'll likely see people rushing into safe havens like gold and silver. And if you think the US outlook is bad, hold on, because the forecast for Europe and the UK looks even worse. The big problem there is the energy crisis. High natural gas prices could absolutely crush their manufacturing industries. And this puts their central banks in what the report calls a doom loop, an impossible choice. They'll have to raise interest rates to fight inflation, but they'll be doing it right as their economies are cratering into a deep recession. Now, here's a twist I bet you didn't see coming. While all this turmoil is hitting the West, the forecast actually points to China and Hong Kong becoming a relative safe haven. And the reason is actually pretty simple. They get their oil overland from Russia, so they're insulated from the Middle East energy shock. The prediction is that big money is going to flee the chaos in the US and Europe and pour into Chinese markets looking for some stability. Now, for South Korea, the message from the models is crystal clear. These wild market swings, they're here to stay. I know this chart looks super technical, but the bottom line is very simple. It's telling us that the extreme instability we're seeing, that reflexivity we talked about, it's not a temporary glitch. It's now baked into their market for the rest of the year. In South Korea, the chaos is the new normal. So, with all this chaos, where does the money go? You guessed it, the currency markets. And the main theme is going to be a massive, desperate flight to safety. As you can see here, currencies like the euro and the Korean won are expected to get absolutely hammered. And the one undisputed king left standing through all of this, the US dollar. The Analyst predicts it will achieve structural superstrength as it becomes the world's ultimate safe haven. So, after sifting through all this data, all this analysis, what's the bottom line? What are the new rules of the game for navigating this absolutely chaotic market in 2026? This slide really brings it all home. The entire forecast basically boils down to 3 new realities we have to accept. First, that the AI software boom was an illusion. Second, that high inflation is now structural, it's permanent. And third, that the markets themselves have become reflexive, meaning they're driven by fear and feedback loops, not facts. So what does this all mean for your money? Well, the report is pretty blunt. In a world where governments are printing money like there's no tomorrow to pay for things like defense spending, holding cash is a guaranteed way to lose. The forecast sees a massive rotation of money out of cash and into hard assets, specifically US defense stocks and things that have held their value for centuries, like gold and silver. Which leaves us with one final and kinda unsettling question. This entire analysis suggests we've entered a new era of structural breaks, a time where the old economic models just don't work anymore. So the question we all have to ask ourselves is this: if the old rules are broken, what are the new rules we need to learn just to survive?